My name is Amanda. I was 28 when my mom told me I was too embarrassing to attend her retirement gala. She said it like she was doing me a favor. It's just not your kind of crowd, she added, flipping through fabric swatches at a downtown boutique. These are people I've worked with for 30 years. You tend to be a little tense in public settings. Tense. That was the word she always used when she didn't want to say, "You make me uncomfortable." I stood there holding the navy silk dress I'd picked out 2 weeks earlier, the one I thought we'd wear together in different cuts. Matching, but individual. Like family was supposed to be. She didn't even look at it. Instead, she turned to Heather, my younger sister, and said, "You should try the coral. You've got the skin tone for it." Heather smiled, already halfway to the dressing room. No one asked what I was wearing because I wasn't going. The gala was being hosted at the Wilshire Grand Ballroom, a $15,000 venue I had introduced to my mother back when I ran their digital marketing campaign during a budget cut. I knew every exit, every light fixture. I designed the brochure template for their entire department. I'd helped save her job once, quietly, without credit. And now I wasn't welcome at the farewell party. Mom called it a professional boundary. I called it what it was, a public rejection disguised as logistics. The day of the gala, I stayed in my office late, emails open, headphones on, but not working, not really. Around 7:30, a client sent me a blurry photo. "Didn't know you were connected to this event. Your work is everywhere." The image was unmistakable. The banner hanging behind the head table used my original typography, my color palette. Even my footer design from a private pitch I'd shown Mom once when she said she needed ideas for something elegant. I stared at it, then zoomed in. Front row table, Mom, her department chair, and Heather. Wearing the navy silk, my dress, I stood up so fast my chair skidded behind me. For a second, I didn't even feel anger, just airless. Like the world had pulled all the oxygen away and left me blinking in silence. She hadn't just excluded me, she had replaced me, in public, in my work, in my identity. That night, I didn't cry. I walked 6 blocks to a diner that stayed open until midnight and sat in the last booth with a cold tea I never drank. At 9:42 p.m., my phone buzzed. One message. From Heather. No text, just a photo. Her and Mom smiling beneath the ballroom chandeliers. Caption, "Such an unforgettable night." I turned the phone face down. The diner smelled like grease and lemon cleaner. 2 booths away, a couple argued softly over a slice of pie. No one noticed me. And for the first time in years, I wondered if that had been the plan all along. The next morning, I woke up with dry eyes and a bitter taste that coffee couldn't wash away. I stared at the navy dress still hanging by my closet, tags on, untouched, and felt the echo of the photo Heather had sent. Their smiles, their lighting, the coral chiffon brushing against my dress design like it had always belonged to someone else. I wasn't angry yet, not fully. I was still trying to convince myself it had been some kind of misunderstanding. Maybe Mom had panicked, thought I'd be uncomfortable, and figured it was best to shield me from the pressure. That fantasy lasted until I walked into the Wilshire Grand the next afternoon. I didn't tell anyone I was going. I dressed professionally. Blazer, flats, clean ponytail. I brought a tablet just in case anyone asked what I was doing there. I wasn't there to cause a scene. I just needed to see it. The staff was already clearing the decor. I spotted the same floral arches I'd sketched months earlier, now disassembled and leaning against wall panels like abandoned scaffolding. The lighting strip still glowed with the soft gradient I'd chosen for my mother's company website. Everything had my fingerprints, but none of my presence. At the edge of the banquet hall, I approached a catering assistant who was packing unused menus. "Hi," I said. "I'm Amanda. I helped coordinate some of the design, just doing a quick check for my records." She smiled politely. "Oh, you're Heather's sister, right?" The way she said it, Heather's sister, not Amanda, sent a needle through my chest. "She said you might stop by, said you were curious." Curious, like some outsider looking in through a window. The girl handed me a stack of leftover programs, glossy, expensive. Inside on page 2 was a welcome letter signed by my mom. Underneath was a list of honored family guests. Heather's name was printed in bold. Next to hers, beloved daughter. I wasn't listed, not as daughter, not as guest, not at all. My jaw locked, but I didn't say anything. The girl offered me a to-go bag with leftover sweets. I declined and walked out into the parking garage. That's when I saw Heather again. She was walking toward a rideshare, heels dangling from one hand, still in the dress, my dress, laughing into her phone. She saw me. paused, then waved casually like this was normal. Hey, she said. Mom thought you'd stop by. She said if you came, not to cause drama. I'm not here to cause anything, I replied, voice tight. Just needed to confirm what I already knew. Heather tilted her head. It's not personal, you just stress her out. That was the phrase again. Tense, stressful, too much. The words they used when they wanted to erase me without blood. She said the gala was a celebration, not a therapy session. I took a step closer. You wore my dress. She blinked. Oh, Mom picked it, said it looked too harsh on you, made you look severe. I turned without another word, walked past the valet station into the sun-drenched exit of the garage, and kept walking until I reached the street. The sounds of the city felt clearer than her voice, more honest than the script she had memorized. This wasn't about tension. This was about rewriting history in real time, and I was the redacted line. The bus ride home was quiet, but my mind wasn't. I scrolled back through the last 12 months of my life like it was a stranger's timeline. My fingers hovered over photos, texts, invites, plans, every digital breadcrumb of a family that had quietly stopped seeing me. And it started earlier than I'd admitted to myself. There was the lunch I'd scheduled for Mom's birthday, canceled last minute because Heather already took her somewhere. No mention of where, no follow-up. There was the family picnic I never heard about until Heather posted a carousel of perfect shots. Her, Mom, and Uncle Ray. Smiling, grilling, my casserole recipe on the table. No one had asked for it, they just made it. Or the conference I spoke at in Denver, where I'd asked Mom to watch my keynote online. She said the time didn't work for her. Later, I found out she and Heather had gone on a spa retreat that same weekend. One last mother-daughter thing before retirement. No tag, no mention, just buried in a story that vanished after 24 hours. Each moment by itself looked small, but together they painted something brutal, a quiet, strategic erasure. The kind of cruelty that didn't shout, but never forgot to smile. I opened my notes app and began listing everything. Dates, events, quotes, images. Not for revenge, not yet, just to understand the shape of what had been taken. Because this wasn't just about a party anymore, it was about identity theft. Performed slowly, sweetly, with pastel ribbons and you're just imagining it, gaslight. The next morning, I sat in a corner booth at a campus cafe near my office, nursing a coffee that had long gone cold. I stared at the words I'd typed. Mother-daughter retreat, a phrase from a flyer Heather had reposted months ago, tagged at the edge of a canyon resort in Sedona. She wasn't the daughter who planned family trips. She didn't even like hiking. But that weekend, she was, and Mom had gone. I remembered offering Mom a getaway months earlier, after she'd complained about feeling invisible at work. I'd pitched a quiet cabin, just the two of us, to reconnect. She'd laughed softly. Alone time with you? I think I'd just get interrogated. That was the moment, the one I'd buried under logic and adult politeness. Because what daughter wants to admit her mother dreads being alone with her? The cafe filled with late morning chatter, professors, students, someone practicing violin on the patio. And I sat with a grief that had no funeral. She had already buried me from her future. That night I told myself I needed closure, or maybe confirmation, something final. So I drove past my mother's house, not to go in, just to see the lights. Her car was there, so was Heather's. In the window, silhouettes moved. Wine glasses, laughter, music playing from some Bluetooth speaker I bought them last Christmas. My hands gripped the steering wheel, but I didn't get out. Instead, I opened my tablet and typed one more entry in the Notes app. Excluded by design, pattern confirmed. Because some betrayals don't need confrontation, they need documentation. The invitation hadn't come to me directly. It was a forward, accidental or careless, I'll never know, from a cousin who assumed I'd be there. The subject line was harmless. Sunday brunch, family farewell. The kind of message that should have warmed me, but now I knew better. This wasn't a brunch, it was a controlled room, a curated event, and I was not part of the curation. That's why I went, not as Amanda, the included, but as Amanda, the witness. It was hosted at an upscale garden bistro on the edge of town, the kind with wrought iron chairs and glass pitchers of infused water already sweating on white linen tables. I arrived 10 minutes early and walked the perimeter, invisible in oversized sunglasses and a blazer I hadn't worn since my last consulting pitch. I wasn't on the list. The hostess asked for a name. I gave her someone else's, my middle name, with my cousin's last. She smiled and waved me through. The family was seated near the pergola, shaded under lemon trees. 20 guests, all familiar, all laughing. Heather spotted me. For a second, her expression froze. Just a fraction too long. Then she smiled that polished, press-ready smile. "Look who's here," she said, gesturing like I'd always been expected. "You made it." Mom turned from the head of the table. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Didn't know you got the invite," she said, arranging her cloth napkin like it had wronged her. I played it light. "I heard there was quiche." The brunch unfolded like theater. Polite laughter, toasts, a slideshow looping on a rented screen that showed Heather and Mom at various milestones. Graduations, work events, beach trips. I wasn't in a single frame. Not one. Even baby pictures had been chosen carefully. No trace of me. I excused myself midway and walked toward the indoor lounge where the restrooms were tucked behind a flower wall. That's when I heard them. Heather, my mother, talking near the hallway archway just out of sight. "She's only here to make a point," Mom whispered. Heather exhaled. "I told you the cousin list was risky. She was probably watching email chains." "She always watches. That's her problem. She never just lives." Mom's voice was tired but sharp. "And now she's going to act wounded again, like she hasn't spent her life judging everyone who breathes wrong." A pause. Then, "I didn't want her here." It wasn't shouted. It wasn't cruel in volume. It was something worse. Calm, settled, certain. "She poisons the air when she walks in," Mom continued. "I'm done shrinking for her emotions." Heather didn't defend me. She just asked, "Do you want me to ask her to leave?" Another pause. "No," Mom said. "Let her eat. Let her watch. It'll hurt more." My fingers curled into my palm. I turned, walked quietly back to the patio, sat at the far edge of the table, and ate the lemon tart no one noticed me holding. The sunlight was bright. The laughter rang louder, and I chewed every bite like a recording device. Because this wasn't just a brunch, it was a verdict, and they thought I'd never hear the sentence. I stayed until dessert, not because I wanted to, but because I needed to. Every smile, every shallow toast, every scripted moment felt like salt. Not just on wounds, but on erasure. Deliberate, practiced erasure, dressed in linen and mimosa flutes. I didn't speak again after returning to the table, I just watched. How they leaned in for Heather's stories. How my mom brushed crumbs from her collar while nodding at a compliment about the slideshow. They were curating their version of reality, one where I didn't fit the aesthetic, too sharp, too aware, too much. I finished my tart and slipped away before group photos. No one stopped me. The next day, I pulled a dusty box from the back of my hallway closet. Inside it was the retirement gift I designed 6 months earlier, when I still believed my mother might want something from me other than silence. It was a custom photo frame, matte walnut, carved with the words, "Legacy isn't what you leave, it's who remembers." The plan had been to fill it with a picture of the two of us, me standing beside her at the university podium after her final lecture. I'd even arranged to have a colleague snap a high-resolution shot that day, but that day never came. She'd told me not to attend the lecture, that it was just for the department. Heather had gone, I hadn't. Now the frame was still blank. No photo, no memory, just wood and space. I cleaned it gently, polished the surface, then wrapped it in soft tissue and placed it inside a sleek black gift bag. No card. The following afternoon, I delivered it. She wasn't home, but I knew the door code. She never changed it. Probably didn't think I'd ever use it again. The living room was immaculate, cold, impersonal, the same decorative vases and coffee table books she'd had for years. I walked to the mantel and removed one of the family portraits, Heather in the center, of course, and replaced it with the frame. Empty, but purposeful. I adjusted the angle so the carved words faced outward. Let her see it, let her guess, let her feel the space where I used to be. On the way out, I passed the hallway mirror, the same one I'd stood in front of the night before prom, waiting for her to say I looked beautiful. She hadn't then either. I drove away without checking for messages. That evening, Heather posted a story, just a boomerang of the frame, captioned, "Gift from someone dramatic." Laughing emoji, heart. The comments were instant. "Oh, burn. Someone's in their feelings. Must have killed her to buy something nice." I didn't reply, but I took a screenshot, one more line in the archive I was building. This wasn't over, but it was shifting. From pain to purpose, from reaction to architecture. Let them think it was just a frame. Because what they didn't know was that I was building something too. Not a memory, a reckoning. I hadn't looked at the vendor contract in months, but as I sat on my balcony 2 days later, Heather's story still haunting the edges of my vision, something clicked. The photo booth, it was mine. Not just in memory, legally. I'd licensed it to a network of event companies across the region 3 years ago. Hardware, software, branding, back-end tech. The package included facial recognition filters, interactive overlays, real-time uploads to an event stream. It also included usage logs, data, and somewhere buried in those lines would be evidence. I opened my laptop and logged into the dashboard. The moment the portal loaded, I stopped breathing. There it was. The most recent event tagged under the active license. See Whitmore Retirement Gala, the Glass Atrium. Uploaded by Whitmore, a SOC admin. They hadn't just used my design. They'd booked my tech through one of my partners, probably thinking it would blend into the vendor list, just another asset to rent and forget. But they'd never canceled my admin access. And that meant I could see everything. Photo uploads, filter selections, real-time captions, even the metadata. A cold spark lit in my spine. I clicked into the media folder. There, framed in perfect lighting, were images of my mother, Heather, their colleagues, laughing, toasting, holding champagne flutes. In every frame, my design overlays were present. Digital confetti, my signature tag in the corner. Event Flow by Amanda W. They hadn't even scrubbed the watermark. I opened the Analytics tab. Dozens of guests had shared the images live during the event. Some had added hashtags, personal captions, even tagged my sister. They'd built their narrative with my architecture, and worse, they'd licensed it under terms that required credit and tag visibility in all published materials. I was owed public attribution, legally, but they'd buried that, pretended it was ambient, pretended I wasn't in the room. I always was. I took screenshots, exported logs, downloaded every photo, documented timestamps. Then I crafted a message, not to send yet, but to have. Polite, precise, cold. It read, per your usage of the Event Flow TM system during the Whitmore Gala, please review the attribution clauses outlined in the licensing agreement. Non-compliance will result in retraction notices or formal mediation. Kindly confirm receipt. I saved it as a draft, then closed my laptop and stared into the late afternoon sun, red behind the clouds. The irony stung like citrus in a cut. They had staged their triumph on ground I'd built, used my tools, my software, my labor, and still refused to say my name. But now I had documentation, now I had proof. And what's more, now I had their attention even if they didn't know it yet. The question wasn't if I would act. The question was how loud I wanted the fallout to be, because I'd stopped grieving. I was building. The first misstep wasn't mine, it was Heather's, or maybe Mom's. Hard to tell, really, when two people are that fluent in mutual cruelty. Their mistakes tend to blend. It was Thursday. I was walking past a cafe near campus, the one with sidewalk tables and half-baked privacy. I wasn't planning to stop until I heard Heather's voice. Sharp, familiar, and not filtered for public tone. I paused behind a hedgerow near the railing, out of their sightline. She was on a video call, laptop open, face too animated to notice anything beyond her screen. I heard my mother's voice first. It's fine, she won't do anything. She never does. Then Heather's reply, but what if she's building something? I saw her LinkedIn spike this week. A pause, then laughter. She's not building anything, Heather. She sent an empty photo frame. That's what she is, empty, just drama and packaging. The words were calm, but they gutted like glass. Heather twirled her straw, visibly amused. So what if she posts the photos, we just deny it? Mom again. Exactly. Who's going to believe Amanda? We've been shaping this story for years. One post won't undo that. There was a silence on my end, but inside a rupture. Years. She'd said years. This wasn't about one party, it was scaffolding. Long, deliberate construction. Of erasure, of narrative theft, of me. I stood there, still as stone, until the call ended. Heather closed her laptop, sipped the last of her matcha, and left. She never saw me. I went home with a pulse so loud it drowned my thoughts. That night, I reopened the draft email, reread it. Too gentle, I revised it. Then I opened a new folder and labeled it Retirement Response A. Inside it, I placed everything. Contracts, screenshots, shared photos with my watermark, the call transcript, recreated from memory and immediately logged into a private journal, timestamped. And then one final addition. A single photo from the gala, Not a posed one, a candid. Someone had snapped it mid-toast, Heather front and center, raising her glass while standing directly in front of my brand filter. The irony couldn't have been louder. I saved it as cover JPG. The next morning, I contacted my IP consultant, not for escalation yet, but for verification. Yes, they confirmed, the gala's image use violated attribution protocol. Yes, EventFlow's system data could serve as timeline evidence. Yes, I could initiate a formal takedown, quietly or publicly. The choice was mine. And then they asked the real question. Do you want compliance or impact? I didn't answer right away. Because I wasn't finished gathering, I needed one more piece. I needed them to admit it in writing. And if I knew my mother, she'd give me just that. All I had to do was nudge the right string and wait for her to pull the rest herself. I've always believed in writing things down, not just for clarity, but for record. Paper is patient, digital trails are forever. So when I sat down that morning with my tea and opened a fresh message draft, I wasn't doing it for closure. I was setting bait. The subject line was simple. Lovely event, thank you for including me in spirit. I kept my tone breezy, casual, just enough warmth to disarm suspicion. Mom, I wrote, I saw the photos from the gala. Everything looked beautiful. I hope your retirement feels as deserved as it is. I recognize some of the assets you used. I'm glad they worked so well in the space. Then I added the line I knew would trigger her control impulse. Some friends tagged me in a few posts. Seems the watermark showed up more than expected. I'll make a note to adjust the defaults for future events. Pause. Let the anxiety bloom. And the final touch, soft as snow. No need to worry about attribution. I know you probably didn't notice. If there's ever any formal reference needed for event flow, I'm happy to provide a quiet citation to keep things easy for your legacy. I signed it simply, Amanda. No drama, no venom, no accusation. Just a polite acknowledgement and a quiet threat woven into a threadbare compliment. Within an hour, she responded. Shorter than usual, but the slip was there. Didn't realize the vendor you used still had your system embedded. We assumed it was all generic after your transition out. We'll speak with them next time. Happy retirement to me, huh? She tried to veil it with humor, but it was done. I had it. Confirmation, in her words, that she knew my system was used, that she bypassed me, that she presumed it was generic and therefore not worthy of credit. Legally, that's admission of infringement. Socially, it was the first crack in her curated glass wall. I copied the message into my documentation folder, labeled it Confession, Gala Use. Then I sat back and let myself smile for the first time in weeks. The power wasn't just in the data. It was in her instinct to cover. The same instinct that drove her to erase me in front of colleagues now made her vulnerable in writing. She couldn't help it, couldn't not respond. And soon, I'd give her another reason. Because the gala wasn't just about ego, it was about perception. And now that perception had teeth. That evening, I reached out to my friend Kaylee, who happened to be a producer for a regional business podcast. I didn't say much, just hinted I might have a story soon, one about the blurred lines between personal erasure and professional theft. She replied within 5 minutes. Tell me when. I'll clear the segment. I didn't confirm yet, I wasn't ready, but the dominoes were standing, one nudge away from collapse, and the person who set them up was finally, quietly afraid of where they'd fall. I was finalizing the outline for Kaylee's segment when the message came through. Not from my mother, not from Heather, but from someone I had stopped expecting anything from a long time ago. Uncle Richard, Dad's brother. He was always the quiet one at gatherings. The only person in our family who had once slipped me $20 in a birthday card without signing his name. The kind of man who watched everything but rarely intervened, until now. His text came in clean, unprompted. They're talking about you again. I thought you should know before they make it public. My pulse tightened. I didn't even ask how he knew what was coming. I just called him. He picked up after 2 rings. Richard? He sighed. Amanda, I know I shouldn't get involved, but this is getting out of hand. What are they doing? They're spinning it, your mom and Heather. They're saying you offered your system, that the photo use was with your blessing, and that now you're threatening them for attention. I didn't speak. I couldn't. Richard kept going, voice low. They're preparing a statement. For a Rotary newsletter, then maybe something broader. Framing it like you're unstable, grasping. I clenched the edge of the table. They've done this before, I said. I know, he said gently, but never with an audience this big. That stuck in my throat. This time, they weren't content with silence. They were preparing a preemptive strike. Something public enough to discredit me before I could share the truth. Something so calm, so reasonable sounding, it would make any response from me seem hysterical. It was what they always did, frame my defense as attack. My boundary is betrayal. Only now, it would be published. You didn't hear this from me, Richard said. But if you're going to act, don't wait too long. I thanked him, hung up, then sat there, staring at nothing. It wasn't just about the gala anymore, this was about character, about history, about whether my voice would ever get to speak before they erased it again. And in that silence, I remembered something from 3 years earlier, a voicemail from my dad. After I'd missed one of Heather's birthday dinners because I'd been in the hospital for an overnight observation, his message hadn't asked if I was okay. It had said, "You always make things about you." And now they were about to do it again, publicly, professionally, permanently. But this time, I had something they didn't. Documentation, receipts, voices that weren't mine, and an audience I had chosen. I called Kaylee back. "Book it," I said. "I'm ready." She didn't ask for notes. Just said, "Thursday, you'll have 20 minutes, say whatever you need." I hung up, opened my final folder, and attached the files. They wanted to define me in their echo chamber? Let them try. Because this time, I'd already bought the mic. Kaylee's podcast studio was tucked into a loft above a wine bar in the city. Minimalist lighting, one microphone, 2 cameras, no distractions. It was perfect. Before the interview, I sat still for a long moment, breathing. The only thing I had in front of me was a small stack of paper, quotes, emails, my mother's message. None of it sensational, all of it real. Kaylee's voice floated through the headset. "Ready when you are, Amanda?" "Let's do it," I said. The intro was brief, professional, just my first name, my business background, and that I was there to talk about the thin line between family legacy and personal autonomy. Then she handed it to me, and I began. I talked about building event flow, quiet nights of coding, designing the client dashboards, funding it on my own while working a day job I hated. I talked about why I never went public when it succeeded, how I wanted the software to be used, not centered around me. Then I moved into what happened last month, the gala. My mother, the photos with my watermark, visible on every table display and scheduling board, the platform used without my name, my permission, my presence, and I said it plainly. It wasn't about the tool. It was about being erased, again. Kaylee nodded silently, letting me keep going. I've spent years trying to separate personal worth from professional work. But when your own family presents your work as theirs, when they reframe your existence as an afterthought, that line disappears. I paused, then I picked up the message my mother had sent, the one admitting she used my system. I read it out loud, word for word. The silence that followed wasn't just quiet, it was electric. Kaylee blinked once. "Do you feel like this was the first time you were professionally undermined by your family?" I opened my mouth to respond, and then my phone, face down beside me, lit up and buzzed once. Then again. Then a third time. Something was wrong. Kaylee noticed the shift in my face. "Everything okay?" I glanced down and flipped the screen. Heather, 6 missed calls, 2 messages, then one from an unknown number, subject line just one word, "Enough." My breath caught. Kaylee leaned in, whispering off mic, "If you need to pause." "No," I said firmly, flipping the phone back over. "No," I repeated into the mic, "because this is what they count on, that I'll stop, that I'll fold." And my voice sharpened, rising just enough. "They're trying to interrupt now while I'm speaking because they know what happens when I finish." Kaylee didn't ask another question. She just tilted her head, gave me space, and I finished with one sentence. "I am not an extension of their legacy. I am the start of my own." Then I took off the headset and exhaled. The screen behind Kaylee blinked with the live comments coming in. Hearts, applause, a few harsh takes, expected, but I didn't read any, because as I stepped off the stool, my phone lit up again. And this time, the name at the top wasn't Heather. It was my father, the man who hadn't said a word in months. And his message? It wasn't a call. It was a forwarded screenshot of a legal notice, one that changed the game. I stood on the corner outside Kaylee's studio, the sky bruising into twilight, phone gripped in my hand like it might bite. I didn't open the attachment yet. I just stared at the sender. Dad, not mom and dad, not even your father, just dad. The man who once sat through 3 of my tech presentations with arms folded, nodding like he understood, then told me afterward, "Your sister's better at public speaking." He hadn't called me in months, and this wasn't a call, it was a warning. I sat down at the edge of a planter and opened the file. My throat went dry by the third sentence. Cease and desist. They were accusing me of defamation with intent to harm familial reputation and future business endeavors. I nearly laughed. Reputation, business, the only business they had was trading my work for social capital at parties. They didn't sell anything, they didn't build anything, they paraded it. And now, because I'd said the truth aloud, they were trying to shut me down, with a lawyer's signature and a legal letterhead. But it wasn't the letter itself that shook me. It was the third page. Attached at the bottom was a clause I hadn't seen in years, one I barely remembered signing. When I launched EventFlow, I'd asked for a small loan from my parents. Not because I needed it, but because I thought it would bring them in, make them feel invested, part of something. They'd insisted it be a gift. What I didn't realize then, what they'd buried in the agreement, was a stipulation that gave them consultative attribution rights if the company ever gained media visibility tied to family involvement. That's how they spun it, and that's how they used it. I closed the file and stared into the street, cars passing like streaks of someone else's life. Inside Kaylee's studio, I could see her waving from the window, oblivious to the legal time bomb ticking in my hands. I could still walk away, pretend this wasn't happening, take down the episode before it aired. But I knew this was what they wanted, not silence, compliance, and I'd already lost too much to play quiet again. Instead of going home, I walked through downtown, into the night, until I reached a glass building with blue backlit lettering, Myra Fields Law Group. She was my mentor. My first legal advisor when EventFlow was nothing but sketches and late-night voice memos. We hadn't talked in a year. But when I stepped through those doors, I didn't hesitate. The receptionist looked up. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," I said, "but tell her Amanda's here, and it's urgent." 10 minutes later, I was in a corner conference room, Myra in front of me, skimming through the file. She didn't flinch. "I remember this clause," she murmured. "They had it inserted after the original draft. You were 19. No rep, no review." My stomach turned. "Can they use it?" She closed the folder slowly, looked me in the eye. "If you back down, yes. If you fight it, no. They'd never survive discovery, and if they push this publicly, their entire narrative collapses." "What do I do?" She smiled, a tired, proud kind of smile. "You let them sue, you countersue, and you don't stop talking." And just like that, the fire that had been building in my chest found its air. They hadn't sent that letter to win. They sent it to scare me into disappearing again. And this time, I was ready to let the world watch me stay. Kaylee's studio buzzed with soft lighting and the smell of burnt coffee. We were supposed to film a brand collaboration that morning. Something light, something stupid. Lipsticks and planners. Instead, I stood in front of the same camera we used for product shots and told Kaylee, "I'm doing it, today." She didn't ask. She just adjusted the focus, hit record, and backed away. I didn't read from notes. I didn't wear makeup. I spoke. "My name is Amanda, and if you're watching this, it means you're hearing my story before someone else twists it." I held up the cease and desist letter. No details, no legal posturing, just the fact that it existed. My parents, yes, the ones who gave me this name, sent me this because I used my voice, because I told the truth about what I experienced growing up as their second-place daughter. The words didn't crack. They cut. For years, I was the kid who didn't smile the right way in family photos. The one who asked questions during holidays. The one they kept out of the frame when real estate clients came to dinner. A pause. Deep breath. I built my company without them, but they want credit. I spoke the truth, and they want silence. This is me saying no. No edits, no transitions. Kaylee uploaded it raw with a single title card to anyone who's been the embarrassing child. It didn't go viral overnight. It didn't need to, because 3 hours later, I got a call from a voice I hadn't heard in a decade. "Hey, it's Marcy. From high school. I just watched your video." My chest tightened. "Thank you," she said, "for saying it out loud, for not letting them bury you." I nearly cried, not because of Marcy, but because of what followed. Old classmates, former professors, one of my first employers, even someone from my mom's church group. One by one, they reached out, not to gossip, not to pry, but to tell me what they saw, when they saw me. Your mom used to pretend you were the assistant when you brought her to work events. I remember your sister bragging about how you were too intense for family dinners. I always thought it was weird how they left your name off the donor wall. Piece by piece, the facade cracked, and then it shattered. Because 2 days later, Kaylee looked up from her phone and said, "You need to see this." My mom, sitting on a beige couch on a morning talk show. The headline beneath her read, "Real estate matriarch addresses daughter's allegations." She didn't cry. She didn't rage. She performed. "It breaks my heart," she said softly, "that Amanda feels that way. But sometimes children rewrite the past to justify their own failures." Kaylee froze the frame. "You want me to take it down?" I looked at the paused image. My mother, eyes glossy, voice gentle, mask seamless. "No," I said. "We go live." That night, Kaylee hosted a stream with me as guest, not just to respond, to reclaim. I read every quote she gave, and then I read messages from people who'd watched me disappear in plain sight, year after year. And when someone in the chat asked, "Are you scared they'll sue again?" I smiled. They already did, but I'm not 19 anymore, and I have something they can't buy, proof. I held up the same letter, this time annotated, marked, highlighted. And I ended with the words I needed to hear at 13/17/24. "I'm not embarrassing, I'm just not yours to control anymore." The text came at 2:47 a.m. Simple, unmistakable. "Can we talk?" I hadn't heard from Heather in almost a year. Not since the gala, not since the silent betrayal in heels and diamonds, and certainly not since the lawsuit. I stared at the message, expecting a follow-up. Nothing. I replied one word, "Call." 3 minutes later, the phone lit up. Her voice was breathy, careful. "I watched the video," she said, "all of it." Silence stretched between us like old wallpaper peeling in a forgotten room. "I didn't lie," I said flatly. "I know." That stopped me. "I knew about the fund," she said. "Mom made me promise not to tell you." I sat up straight. "What fund?" Heather exhaled. "The one Dad set up in your name when you were a teenager, the one they drained when they bought the lake house." My mouth went dry. I remembered the lake house, remembered them calling it a smart investment for the family. I remembered Mom's smug little smile every time she said, "One day this will all be yours, girls." I'd assumed she meant emotionally, not literally. "They said you wouldn't use it wisely," Heather added. "They said you were too impulsive, that if you found out, you'd blow it on, I don't know, freedom." She laughed, bitter, sad. "I'm sorry, Amanda. I kept quiet because it was easier, because they still paid my car insurance." I didn't speak. I let the silence do the cutting. "I want to make it right," she whispered. "That's why I'm calling." "You can't give the money back," I said. "So what are you offering? An apology with an Instagram filter?" "No," she snapped. "I want to testify." The air went still. "What?" "I'll go public. I'll tell the truth. I'll say what they did, on record, on camera, in court if it comes to that." I didn't trust it. Not yet. "Why now?" She didn't hesitate. "Because when Mom went on TV and said you were rewriting the past, I saw her rewrite mine." Apparently, our mother had given a private interview the day before, a follow-up exclusive. She hadn't warned Heather, and she'd said verbatim, "I always knew Heather would thrive because she listened. Amanda always had to rebel." It was subtle, soft, but unmistakable. "She threw me under," Heather said, "to make her lie prettier." Now it was personal. "Fine," I said, "but you're not doing it through me. You're calling my lawyer." Heather agreed, but before she hung up, she said one more thing that stuck like glass behind my ribs. "You were always the brave one, Mandy. I was just better at pretending." The call ended, but the line didn't go silent, because less than an hour later, my lawyer forwarded me a voicemail from a third party. "Thought you'd want to hear this," she said. "It's from your father's accountant." Click, play. "I can't keep covering this up. The numbers don't lie, and neither should I. Call me." That was all, but it was enough. By the time the sun rose, 3 things were clear. 1, Heather was flipping. 2, the media strategy had backfired. 3, someone on the inside was ready to confess. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just picked up my phone and texted Kaylee, "Stage is ours now. Let's finish this." The auditorium wasn't enormous, but the lights made it feel like a coliseum. It had been booked under Kaylee's name. No press passes, no hints, just one invitation-only event. A conversation about inheritance, power, and silence. I took the stage alone. No makeup crew, no glam squad, just a mic, a folder of documents, and a small glass of water. My name is Amanda, I began, and for most of my life, I was the daughter who didn't need help. The daughter who had to learn everything the hard way because that's what they called resilience. A murmur moved through the audience. The first row was all familiar faces, mentors, ex-colleagues, Kaylee. Heather was in the second row, eyes glassy but locked forward. I want to tell you about a trust fund I didn't know existed until last week, I continued. A fund set up in my name and secretly emptied to finance something I wasn't invited to enjoy. I showed the signed withdrawal forms. I held up a photocopy of the real estate deed, bought in my name, then transferred behind my back using forged permissions. The accountant's statement followed. Every page I flipped hit the air like a gavel, but I wasn't done. I turned to the audience and spoke not as a victim, but as a case study. I was taught that obedience equals love, that asking questions made me selfish, that not showing up when I wasn't invited made me ungrateful. I paused. And then I played the voicemail, Dad's accountant trembling. Heather followed. She stood beside me, turned to the crowd and said, "My parents asked me to protect a lie. I did, and I regret it. Today I'm choosing to stand with the sister I betrayed." It was the first time she'd called me that, out loud, publicly. There were reporters in the crowd. We hadn't invited them, but someone had tipped them off. Probably Kaylee, probably on purpose. And by the time the Q&A opened, it wasn't about the money anymore. It was about patterns. A woman asked, "How did it feel when they praised your sister's engagement? The same week they ignored yours?" I didn't dodge it. "They threw her a party the same weekend I came home crying from my fiancé's parents' house," I said. "They knew, they just didn't care." Another asked, "Why didn't you go public sooner?" I took a breath. "Because shame works best in private." And they were very good at keeping me quiet. When I stepped off that stage, my legs trembled, but my spine didn't. Outside the auditorium, I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from Mom, 1 from Dad, and a message from an unknown number. They're lawyering up, but it's too late. By evening, clips from the talk had gone viral. Not for scandal, but for rawness. A therapist posted a reaction, calling it a masterclass in reclaiming narrative from emotional manipulation. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt like someone who had finished running with a knife in her back and had just now realized she'd made it to the finish line still bleeding. But I also felt unalone. Heather and I sat in silence outside the venue. The sky was lavender and low. She nudged a gift bag toward me. Inside was a bracelet, the same one we used to fight over as kids. Hers, now mine. "No more pretending," she said. I nodded, gripping the bracelet like it held time itself. It didn't undo anything, but it marked the shift. They picked the restaurant. Not me. A quiet corner booth in a place they never used to afford when I was a teenager. Back when I worked extra shifts to help pay their heating bills. Now they sat here like it was tradition, like it had always been their spot. They didn't stand when I arrived. My mother wore pearls. My father glanced at his watch like I was late. I wasn't. I took my seat. No hugs, no greetings. Just cutlery against plates and the faint jazz humming overhead. The server brought water. No one touched it. "We saw the footage," Dad said. "Is that your opening line?" I asked. Not "how are you?" Not even "why?" Just, "We saw the footage?" Silence. Mom finally blinked. "Amanda, you've made quite a mess." I stared at her. That phrase, "you've made," like I had choreographed my own erasure, edited myself out of family albums, chose to be invisible in my own home. "I revealed the mess," I said quietly. "I didn't make it." Dad leaned in. "We did what we thought was best for the family. You airing it publicly was cruel." My laugh was short and dry. "Cruel as signing over my trust fund without telling me. Cruel as watching me walk alone while Heather had chauffeurs. Cruel as treating me like an employee you never wanted to promote." His eyes didn't shift. "Heather apologized." "She did," I said. "And you two?" Neither of them answered. Instead, Mom reached into her purse and slid a folder across the table. Cream-colored, thick, the kind that holds papers that pretend to offer resolution. "We want to make it right," she said. "This is a revised will." I didn't touch it. "You think ink and paper balances what you drained from me?" I asked. "You think one reallocated inheritance heals 27 years of favoritism, silence, and subtle starvation?" I wasn't shouting, but my voice carried more weight than it ever had around them. Dad adjusted his tie. "You're angry." I leaned in. I'm clean. That's what you're confusing for anger. I'm clean of your shame, your silence, your systems. I came today because I wanted you to know that. They looked stunned because it was the first time I'd said no without guilt lining my voice. I stood. You can leave the will, I said. I'll send it to my lawyer. But understand this, you don't get to rewrite yourselves into the parts of my story where you never showed up. Mom's hand trembled. Amanda, we're still your parents. I turned halfway. And I'm still your daughter, but I'm not your second choice anymore. I walked out before they could answer. Outside, the sky was shifting. Early evening, cool breeze. I pulled the bracelet Heather gave me tighter around my wrist and took out my phone. Text from Kaylee. You okay? Reply. More than okay, I'm free. Later that night, I sat alone on my apartment balcony, watching city lights flicker like hesitant stars. I didn't feel vengeful. I felt hollow, but in the way a cleaned out room feels after junk's been thrown out. Ready. Not everything had been fixed, but something irreversible had occurred. I had become someone they no longer had power over. And that, in the end, was enough.